So I need to start with a huge thank you to all the people who turned up for my live stream this morning. I know it was very, very short notice, and I will get better at doing those notifications. I must admit, with this morning's live stream, I was up in the air as to whether or not I was going to go ahead with it. I think that was probably more to do with anxiety than anything else. I must admit, I like to be super, super prepared for my live streams, and I felt that I wasn't quite prepared. As it turns out, yeah, there were a few glitches along the way, but I don't think it went too badly. If you haven't caught that video yet, I highly recommend it. I did it as a crossover between Lily and Jack's case and Gus's case, because the sergeant from South Australia Police was talking about the search efforts for Gus, and it answers a lot of questions in terms of what Rob McCammon was talking about in various recent interviews in terms of the search. So it just really explained a lot of the things that Rob McCammon referred to, but then didn't go into detail. So it's highly worth checking out. Now, in terms of my approach to live streams, my live streams are not very different from my recorded videos. I don't do all the waffle at the beginning, greeting every man and his dog. For me, it's a waste of my time, and for many people, it's a waste of their time. I like to just get in, get on with it, and get it done. So it's not a lengthy live stream. It was a bit over an hour long, and that's what I aim for with my live streams. I try to keep them within an hour or not much over an hour, because if I can't cover it succinctly within an hour or a bit over, then I feel like I'm not doing a good job. Now, obviously, when I do these analyses videos, it's a slightly different kind of scenario, because there's a lot more deeper discussion in these ones, whereas my live streams, I'm aiming for them to be more sort of, commentary without really digging into analysing speech or anything like that. Those ones will always be videos, because it allows me time to pause, to think, to take a break if I need a bit of time to just clear my brain. And, I'm aiming to do 3 live streams a week at this point in time, just to fit in around my schedule with everything else. So maybe one of those live streams will be a more relaxed one, where it is more of just a looser case discussion, where I can relax a little bit and engage a bit more with people, because I wonder if sometimes I'm not getting the right balance. I know some people hate live streams because people just waffle too much, but then I know a lot of people love live streams because they love that engagement. So let me know if you'd like one of my live streams each week to be just a kind of a general case discussion, which would then allow you guys some input into that. Now, I wanted to share an update in terms of channel membership. I actually did a video for members last week discussing this, because I wanted to give them a heads up first. But now I think I've given them enough time so I can share. So I think we can all recognise that the cost of living has not improved anything in the last 6 to 12 months. I think we're all struggling just a little bit more. I know for me, within the last 6 months, I've had another rent hike, and I've noticed grocery prices going up again. And on top of that, I know there are people who feel that they would like to have memberships to one or more of their favourite channels, but they find the cost to be somewhat prohibitive. So what I've done, I was having a look at memberships and seeing if there was anything I could add to give better value for my members, because I know that I struggle sometimes to keep up with member videos. So I was in there looking at the whole membership thing, trying to figure out how to do better value. And it's been a while since I set up memberships in the first place. And I discovered that there is actually a lower tier of membership that I hadn't activated. So that lower tier costs $1.49 Australian. Now, I don't know what that equates to in Canadian or American dollars, but I know it would be less than $1.49. Unless, of course, they're charging you $1.49, like in whatever country it is. But I think that it translates in terms of the dollars. So I've introduced that as a lower tier. So now my memberships, and if someone can give me, drop me a line, let me know what it comes up for in your country, that would be great, because then I can let people know. But in terms of memberships now, there are 2 tiers available. There is one tier which is $1.49 and another tier which is $2.99. So I have stuck with the lowest possible cost for memberships, because for me it's more about just allowing people that chance to feel included, and also it allows people to support my channel without feeling like they're paying through the nose for it. Now, in terms of what you get on different tiers, on both tiers you will get shorts that I put out, YouTube shorts, that'll be members only, and that will be for both tiers of membership. And I can't think what they're called right now, the different tiers. But for both those tiers, you get access to YouTube shorts. You also get access to stickers that are like members only stickers, some of which are case related. So there's a little Tinkerbell sticker in there for Maddie Soto. There's a little dinosaur in there for Jack, and there's a unicorn for Lily. There are also occasions when I have videos that I'm not ready to release publicly yet. So it may be if I've done a whole batch of those news stories, and I'll release them at periodic intervals. But if I've got something that I've uploaded onto my YouTube channel, quite often, well, not quite often, but there are times if I've got something up early, then I will release it as a members only video ahead of time, and then down the track I will make it public. So that is something that will be available for both tiers of membership. Likewise, when I do posts for members, that will be available for both tiers of membership. The only thing that's going to be separate, and that's just going to be for the $2.99 membership tier, that is the additional videos that I do. A lot of them are videos that are just more informal case chat, or there may be occasions when there's something about the case that I want to discuss, but there is an important reason for me not wanting to make it public. And then, of course, there's my drive and talk videos, which basically are dash cam footage with me just doing a more informal chat with members. Those sort of long-form videos will only be available on the $2.99 tier, just because it just gives those people just that something extra for going on to that higher tier and giving me that little bit of extra support. That said, best way to support my channel is by subscribing. That helps me to build my channel. It helps me to show YouTube that my channel is worth recommending in terms of videos and stuff like that. So on that note, if you're not someone who is subscribed to my channel and you regularly watch my content, or even if you've just seen 1 or 2 of my videos and you like what you see, consider just clicking that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me out immensely. And of course, the other way you can help me out is by clicking the like button when you watch my videos. That also makes a huge difference. Now, one last thing before I start launching into this video, and that is a huge thank you to the people who've been doing the Buy Me a Coffee and super thanks and super chats. Very much appreciated. You might be able to hear a bit of a crackle in the background with my audio. I know some people picked up on a few audio issues with yesterday's live stream. I haven't had any feedback from today's, but I know the audio isn't still 100% on what it should be, and basically the interface that I've been using up until now just isn't good enough to use with my MacBook. So I've just had to invest in a somewhat more expensive one, which wasn't in the budget for after buying this MacBook. But hey, got to do what you got to do. So the support with the Buy Me a Coffee and the super thanks and super chats has been greatly appreciated. So thank you very much to the people who've done that. Okay, so after a little bit more waffle than I usually do, and after saying that when I do my live streams I don't like a lot of waffle, let's jump into this video.
And when they did up the paper for consent on my DNA, they fill in the paper, May 2nd, missing persons case for Jack and Lily, and then they go through it, and then there's the box checked for criminal involvement, no criminal involvement, and they checked the box for no criminal involvement, and I put my signature on it, and there was my consent.
Now, I spoke about this a little bit in yesterday's video, but basically either he's lying about it being voluntary, which is quite a possibility given that he's made other claims like that he voluntarily handed over his phone, but then when he was trying to make Malaya look bad, he told another reporter that their phones were seized. He also at one point in time claimed that it was his idea about the polygraph exams and that he actually asked them to do the polygraph exams, as opposed to them going, this is part of our investigation. So we know there have been multiple times in the past when he's lied about his claims that he's doing things voluntarily. So either he has lied about this being something that was voluntarily done, and it was something that was actually ordered by the court. So under the Missing Persons Act, they could have made a request to the court to be able to get access to blood samples from him, Malaya, anybody else, and the judge would have approved it. And of course, if that was the case, then the form that is in front of you, or the pieces of the form that I broke up to make it easier for you to see, that would not have been the form that was used. It would be an internal form which doesn't appear on their website, because the form that I've just shown you is for a voluntary donor. So he's lying about one of two things, because this form for a voluntary donor does not, first of all, have anywhere to write down the date of the disappearance of Lily and Jack. All it has, you may have seen in the first screen, it has a box for case number, case and case number. And then there's a list of statements which have to be initialed by the person who is making the voluntary donation of their blood. And at the end, they put their signature and the date. There is nothing there that ticks a box saying this is not a criminal investigation. There is one paragraph here, paragraph C, which the only thing here that comes close to mentioning anything to do with a criminal investigation, and it's not a ticker box where you say it is or isn't a criminal investigation. It is saying here at the bottom paragraph, I understand that volunteering a biological sample may place me in criminal jeopardy. Matches could be used as evidence against me in a criminal investigation and in my subsequent prosecution. The information may also be used to eliminate me as a suspect of a designated offence. So, in actual fact, if he has done it voluntarily, the only thing that is on that entire form that relates to the possibility of criminality is this box that he has to initial, where he's acknowledging that they could use it against him in a criminal case. So, like I said, one of two things is happening here. Both of them are lies. Either he's lying about doing it voluntarily, in which case this form is irrelevant, or he's lying about the form, because we can see quite clearly there is no tick box on that form for them to say it is not a criminal case. Now, the most disturbing thing about what he's said here isn't so much the fact that he's lied, because he's done that consistently for the past 9 months. The most disturbing thing here is it is such a bold-faced lie, but in terms of his regular tells, you've got to watch really closely to see them. We're back down to micro expressions. This is back to at the start of this case when he was masking everything and everything was basically micro expressions, and if you weren't really paying attention you would miss them. And we've got that again here. He does actually, when he says missing persons case for Jack and Lily, you do see straight after that the lizard lip, but it's infinitesimal, barely pops out of the mouth, and then he continues on. When he's saying there's a box, he shakes his head, but again, we're talking about a micro expression here. It's not the usual very clear body language. Probably the only thing that he can't really hide is his blink rate. So there is an increased blink rate again. I mentioned in yesterday's video when he was describing the process of doing the sample, his blink rate slowed down, but it's increased again. And you will notice also that he's giving way less eye contact while he's saying this. So I think if someone went into this and they didn't know Daniel, they didn't know anything about this case, and they were to just look at that, they may have trouble spotting the deception. And that is what is the most disturbing thing for me. But one thing with this lie, this bold-faced lie, is that it shows us that a lot of the things that he's been saying, a lot of these lies that he's been coming out with, have been for the benefit of his public audience. Because obviously the RCMP are going to know that's a lie. He knows that's a lie because he actually filled out the form. So he is lying outright to try and convince the public. So it makes me wonder what other things there are where he may have told the RCMP one thing and then has publicly come out and said another thing. I suspect that probably a lot of these times when he's been trying to gaslight Malaya and trying to accuse her of things, that he probably hasn't done that with the RCMP. But I think at the same time too, when you look at the way he speaks in these media interviews as opposed to the way he's spoken on people's channels or the comments he's put on Facebook or in people's chats, again, he is doing it in a different way. He is a chameleon. He is changing what he says, how he acts, for depending on his audience. A lot of these behaviours that we see in Daniel are the sort of behaviours that some people would look at and say, this person is a psychopath or a sociopath. Now, obviously, I'm not going to come out publicly and call anybody a psychopath or a sociopath. But what I'm saying here is that there are definitely some behaviours from Daniel that people could think point to that sort of thing. So my question for Daniel here is, which lie is it? Is it a lie that you were voluntarily allowing them to do a blood sample? In which case, then maybe the form that you filled in did have a box there for criminal involvement or no criminal involvement, because we can't see those forms. Or is the lie that it wasn't something you did voluntarily and that this is something that the RCMP got permission for with a judge under the Missing Persons Act in terms of a access request? Although I do think Rob McCammon has answered that for us, because he said about having to do everything to judicial standards, meaning they're not taking any chances. So I would imagine that it wasn't voluntary, that they put in a access request with a judge under the Missing Persons Act and got permission from a judge to get a blood sample from Daniel and probably also from Malaya. Because we saw with Stephen Stearns in the Maddie Soto case just how much these criminals will try and wheedle their way out of things, saying that they didn't really give their consent because they were forced to do something. Those sorts of things. So I don't often replay clips because obviously my videos would end up being really, really long, but I'm going to replay that last part of that clip for you to see, and I'm going to play it full speed, and then I'm going to slow it down to 0.7, because I think for me, to really catch what was going on, I had to slow it down to 0.7. I know that I definitely missed the lizard lips when I was playing it at normal speed, so I'll play it at those two speeds for you.
And when they did up the paper for consent on my DNA, they fill in the paper, May 2nd, missing persons case for Jack and Lily, and then they go through it, and then there's the box checked for criminal involvement, no criminal involvement, and they check the box for no criminal involvement, and I put my signature on it, and there was my consent. And when they did up the paper for consent on my DNA, they fill in the paper, May 2nd, missing persons case for Jack and Lily, and then they go through it, and then there's the box checked for criminal involvement, no criminal involvement, and they check the box for no criminal involvement, and I put my signature on it, and there was my consent.
How did you feel when you saw that box was checked?
Very happy. But I've known for, since the start that I'm 100% innocent. But to see investigators say that to me before, but then also, see it visually with my own eyes, it was a big thing.
Honestly, this guy's a piece of work. So let's have a look at what he said first before we break down all the tells that were in this. So she asked him, how did you feel when you saw that box was checked? Of course, he's now got to describe feelings about something that never happened. So you get a lot of fillers in the speech. He's using a few times. Very happy, but I've known for since the start. And then again, but to see investigators say to me before then, but also, see it visually. So he's throwing in fillers. Even before he starts, he throws in a filler. You get the long, drawn out, and another pause. But let's just apply a little bit of logic here to what he has just said. So he said, he was very happy to see that box being ticked because he's known from the start that he's 100% innocent. And then he's doing that referring to his claims previously that they told him early on in the case that he was innocent. But then he says, to see it visually with my own eyes, it was a big thing. This is not the words of someone who is innocent. If you are innocent of something, you don't need to see a box being ticked to confirm to you that you are innocent. Because that is essentially what he's saying here. He's saying It made him happy to see a box being ticked saying that he's innocent. Like, I'm sorry? If you were innocent, none of that would matter. You might feel relieved to see that they are checking that box, but you're not looking for any validation of your claims that you are innocent, because you know that you are innocent, and you know that the investigation is going to show that you are innocent. So this whole thing of making it sound like he needed outside validation to accept that he was innocent, it's a joke. It's an utter joke. And yeah, he made that comment that to see investigators say to me before, which isn't even normal English, because you will notice when he is trying to come out with a lie and it's one that he hasn't had time to think through, his grammar goes out the window completely. The sentences just do not gel like proper sentences. But what he's referring to here is his claims to either the turkey guy or the foggy woman that investigators told him months ago that they knew that he had no involvement in the case or something like that. Or they told him months ago that he was innocent. So he's actually referring back to another lie, one which, as far as I can recall, is not one that he told the media, but one that he told someone on YouTube or something like that. I may be wrong. It could have been in one of those past interviews with Angela McIver, because he seems to spout a lot of crap when he talks to her. And I think that goes back to him having spent years and years, and possibly even a lifetime, basically hoodwinking women, lying to women, gaslighting women, and he seems to have this notion in his head that he is better than them. Like I mentioned in yesterday's video, you never once hear him talk to Angela McIver by her name. Not like in his DT interview where he kept going, Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. It was over the top, if you ask me. But when you are using someone's name, it is your way of showing respect for them. It is showing an interest in them. It is manners, essentially. And it is also manipulation, and that's what he was doing with the turkey guy. But here, by not using Angela's name once in any of his interviews, and he knows her name, he's done so many interviews with her by now, by not using her name, he is showing that he does not see her as an equal. And I would bet any money that that is because she is a female. So yes, he seems to think that he can spout a whole heap of crap to her and she's going to believe him. So his attempts at masking here were clearly falling apart, because what you got was a lot of repetition of words or phrasing. So he's like, I've known for, and then we get further down and he gets to, it was a big thing. So you've got the repetition there where basically, again, it's that thing that I've said like a million times now. The brain doesn't like to lie. So it puts all these things in place to try and stop you from blurting out these lies. And here, it's basically trying to put the brakes on, and he's trying to continue, so he loses the flow of what he's saying. The rhythm of what he's saying is all broken, because he's, like I said, he's trying to come up with it on the spot. So you get all the gaps, you get the filler words, you get repetition, and then a new phrase just for this video, you get the slithering S's. What do I mean by that? He says, when he says say, the S is about a mile long. And same with see. It's not quite as long as say, but he gets these, I'm going to call them slithering S's, because I think that is very descriptive of what is going on. Particularly as you do get this weird head swipe thing that he does as he's saying say with the super long S. Now I'm just going to pause here for a moment. we have night works happening on the main road down from me. And it sounds like they've just started working, and it sounds like they're not going to be very quiet this evening. So I could either just stop the video and then try and finish it in the morning, which is going to cause anxiety for me, and I know there's a lot of people that like my videos being out on time, or I can push on and you can just have noises in the background that is basically roadworks going on about a block down from me. Of course, the major irony is that today is the first day in a really long time when I haven't needed to use the air conditioner. So I could have started recording earlier in the day, but I actually went down a million different rabbit holes, not just in this case, but with other cases that I'm covering. So it really was only after dinner before I finally managed to start recording this. So hopefully those background noises won't be too distracting. I will hopefully be able to start earlier in the day tomorrow because it's not going to be hot tomorrow either. So hopefully I can avoid it tomorrow evening. Anyway, back to Daniel. So another thing you might have noticed is even before he comes out with all these lies, this complete utter BS, after the R where he's trying to figure out what to say, you see him lock his lips. It's hard to see because of the camera angle, but if you watch closely, he does do that. So he's locking his lips, which is a classic sign from Daniel that what's about to come out is a complete load of BS and that it's something that you shouldn't put a lot of weight on. Like I said, the masking this time round wasn't nearly as good as it was in the previous statement that he made. You also see, when he's saying 100% innocent, he raises one eyebrow. Like, give yourself away, Daniel, why not? Why don't you just put a big neon sign up that says guilty? And his blink rate is once again increased. But not only that, you've probably noticed with a lot of his interviews, he does try to get eye contact with the interviewer. He's trying to act all genuine by getting eye contact with them as much as possible. But while he's saying all this, he was really struggling to maintain eye contact, and you see him looking away or looking down quite a bit. Except at the end. And this is something we haven't seen from Daniel for a little while, but after he finishes this statement, or as he's finishing it, he looks up at Angela for approval. This is something he was doing in his very early interviews. He would finish saying something and then he would look up, and with a bit of a tilt on his head as well, trying to make sure that they've bought what he said. It's this thing that it must be his regular thing in terms of his manipulation tactics, something that I think he tried to mask after his first lot of interviews, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that called it out. So he's gone back to checking at the end of his statement to make sure that the interviewer just bought what he said.
So it's your understanding, you believe, that RCMP do not consider you a suspect?
I'd say 100% I'm not considered as a suspect at this point.
Have you noticed we're seeing far fewer of his trademark smirks these days? I think he's very much concerned about what his future holds. So again, we get that whole staccato going on with his speech, especially with spitting out I, because when you're making a lie, trying to say I in that lie is always a struggle. So he's stumbling before he even starts. It's like, I'd say. And it's not the fluent speech of someone who is just being truthful. But we need to look at the words here too. I'd say I'm not considered, or I'd say 100% I'm not considered a suspect. So this is after claiming that he's seen them tick a box. He's been allegedly told months ago he's not a suspect. But he's not saying, I am certain. He's saying, I'd say. When someone says, I'd say, that's not someone giving a definitive answer. That is essentially someone saying, in my opinion. He's also pulled out one of his favourite strategies of not actually giving full details here. So I'd say 100% I'm not considered as a suspect at this point. Her question was, it's your understanding you believe that the RCMP do not consider you a suspect. You'll notice that in his answer, and this is so classic of Daniel, he didn't say, yeah, no, I'm certain that the RCMP don't consider me a suspect. He didn't even say, I'm certain they don't consider me a suspect. He made it very non-committal. He's basically using passive language there. I'm not considered a suspect. He doesn't tell us who it is that doesn't consider him a suspect. It could be Janie's dog doesn't consider him a suspect. It could be his latest girlfriend. It could be that poor damn rooster that we saw locked up in the hen coop all on its lonesome. Because he doesn't add who it is that doesn't consider him a suspect. He just said, I'm not considered a suspect. Well, if you look at most YouTube channels, they consider you a suspect, so it can't be a blanket statement. Yes, it's in response to the question about the RCMP, but him taking the passive voice and actually not specifying exactly who doesn't consider him a suspect is typical of Daniel. He's been doing this since day one. Now, while he's saying this, you can see the vein popping in his neck. And that's only one of many signs here. If you watch carefully, as she's saying, and as she's finishing saying that you're not considered a suspect, you see this minuscule nod happening. It's pretty much a micro-expression, but there is a nod there. So, to me, that's him actually confirming, yeah, they do see me as a suspect. And then, of course, he's shaking his head while he's saying 100%. Now, we can't see what he's doing with his hands or feet while he's saying this because it's zoomed in. But what you can see is the muscles moving in his arms on considered and suspect. So he's definitely doing something with his hands or with his arms when he says considered and suspect. That's a dead giveaway. And pretty much right through saying, I'd say 100%, he's got his eyes closed. So in this instance, instead of trying to get affirmation from the interviewer that she's buying his story, he's being evasive and avoiding eye contact because he probably believes that she's not going to buy his story. It seems like all of a sudden he is starting to unravel in this interview. He held it together for that first bit and masked quite a bit, and now it's just falling apart.
Why is that?
I mean, from that box being checked. But we can also go back to when I had my polygraph exam. When we went over the questions beforehand, all the questions were on death, right? So they concluded that by the end of it, I was truthful with all my answers. So I didn't have anything to do with the murder of Lily and Jack. And there was no questions on the disappearance or abduction or kidnapping or anything of that nature. So that leaves me with, I didn't murder the kids. I have nothing to do with the disappearance because they did not ask any questions on that.
Wow, just how many lies can you say in one very short space of time? I swear, if there was an Olympics for liars, Daniel would get a gold medal. Now, I recall saying this in a previous interview that he did with Angela, but sometimes he gets this look on his face that scares the bejesus out of me. I really do think that this guy has the potential to be very, very dangerous. And I said before in that previous interview that I hope that she has at least 2 cameramen with her when she does this interview, because I fear for her safety. But we saw in this interview that she does have 2 cameramen, and at very strategic spots, if you ask me. Obviously, they're in locations where they can get good footage, but when you look at the placement, when they zoom out, I think they recognise too that this guy's not quite playing with a full deck in terms of temperament, in terms of having a steady temperament, in terms of being a fairly safe person to be around. I know that's a bold claim to make, but I have seen so many looks on his face that make me think I wouldn't want to go anywhere near this guy. Honestly, where do you start with this? I'm just going to basically start and just go through the notes that I made in order, so it might not be in the most logical order, it's just as I jotted it down. First of all, he was not expecting her to challenge him with that question, why is that? In terms of why is he certain that he's not a suspect? Or why is he certain that he's not considered a suspect? And straight up, he says, I mean, so he's throwing in a filler word, trying to figure out, oh heck, what do I say now? Because he expected her to just accept what he said. He wasn't expecting that challenge. So you get, I mean, and you get this big intake of breath, along with a slight grimace. So again, you're getting your filler words while he's doing this. But you might have noticed the tone of his voice changed. And what we are hearing, I think, in his tone is the same sort of tone that I think he would have been using with Malaya on those occasions when she questioned something and he's basically, you have to accept this is how it is. It's that very much almost passive-aggressive tone. It's almost confrontational. There's this level of arrogance to it. So what does he do? He starts out with the imaginary box. So the first evidence that he offers is that this imaginary box was checked. And again, kudos to Shenanigans for thinking to go and have a look and see if she could find those forms. But like I said, either if that's a form that I showed you, then he's lying about the box being checked, or he's lying about actually voluntarily giving that sample. I actually think it's the latter, but that still doesn't say whether or not that box existed on whatever it was that he had to sign. It just means that the form that we're looking at might not actually be the right form. Either way, there is a lie in that statement, so he's already starting out with a lie to try and prove that he's innocent. Good one. And then he starts going on about his polygraph exam. So it seems like he's forgotten the lie that he said before, where he claimed that they told him within a month or so of the investigation beginning that they weren't looking at him anymore or something like that. Which you'll note is basically, if you watched my video the other day where I had audio from Belinda, she actually said that in her interview with CBC back in June. So it's a line that he's basically stolen from Belinda, which is something him and Janie do so frequently. They hear a comment that is made by someone else and decide it sounds good and take it on as their own. Now, when he starts saying, when I had my polygraph exam, he pauses before polygraph. So clearly he's still trying to figure out what he's going to say here, how he's going to word this one. And he's claiming here that they concluded by the end of it that he was truthful with all his, and he says questions and then corrects to answers. Well, we don't know the full story there. because there is a lot of redactions. But to me, the scenarios have to be either some kid on work experience did Daniel's polygraph exam, or the redactions show that actually he wasn't 100% truthful, or, as I suggested last time he was in this hole doing an interview with Angela, that just maybe, based on his very detailed description of how the polygraph exam works, he studied up beforehand to figure out how it was all going to work, and basically between that and between the fact that he seems to be a very good liar, he managed to beat the polygraph like so many other criminals who've done so in the past. So he says all the questions were on death, right? When he says death, you see him do the lizard lips straight after. And then he comes out with this right. Now, this is Daniel's way. Some people use this word differently, but we know from watching the Turkey show, this is his way of saying, this is the truth, you have to accept this, you are not going to question this any further. It's that no more questions on this, this is it. This is what you're getting told, you have to accept it. I would imagine that this is one of the ways that he used to end arguments or discussions with Malaya, by finishing the statement with right, as in, I am right, you're not going to question me anymore. Do not question me because it's not your position to do so. I do think it's telling when he says I was truthful with all my questions or all my answers. Him stumbling over that is no coincidence. He's stumbling over saying that he was truthful with his answers, but he can't get it out properly because clearly he wasn't being truthful. Again, it's that classic situation of the brain jumping in to stop you from putting that lie out that you really shouldn't say. And of course, as he's saying truthful, you see the eyes close and you get this shake of the head. So straight up, he's telling us in every way possible he wasn't truthful. And of course, the fact that we got the lizard lips before this statement proves that this is a lie, because that is one of the things that he just cannot control. And as so many of you have noticed also, the lizard lips happen straight up before a lie. Sometimes they happen straight after a lie, or sometimes there's just lies everywhere and the lizard lips are in between them. But they are signalling a lie with Daniel every time. And he gives himself away so badly with what he says next. Because when you pay attention to what he's saying, he's actually pretty much telling you some major truths here. He says, I didn't have anything to do with the murder of Lily and Jack. And there was no questions on the disappearance. And then he goes to or abduction or kidnapping. Do you notice the difference in what's going on here? When he refers to murder and disappearance, he's using the before those words. When he talks about abduction or kidnapping, there's no the. When you are referring to something as the murder, the disappearance, you are actually referring to something tangible, something that exists. So I could talk about the tub of pens that's sitting on the desk in front of me, because they're tangible, they're real, I can see them. But when you just refer to just things that are pretty much just concepts, abduction or kidnapping, they're just concepts. They're not solid. There's no the. The is something that has happened. So he's actually telling us here that what happened to Lily and Jack equates to murder. And that, well, we know that there was a disappearance. No one's found them. They have disappeared. So again, the disappearance. To me, this is some serious leakage here. Especially given the stark contrast between him saying the murder and then later saying or abduction. It's not the abduction because there was never any abduction. And then you get what equates to a pretty much nonsensical sentence. It is not grammatical anything. So that leaves me with, I didn't murder the kids. Who says that? That is not a correct structure for any sort of sentence. That leaves me with, what is that even supposed to mean? Other than, this is just gobbledygook. He's coming out with it on the spot. And of course, because he's not being truthful, the words are just tumbling out in some random order that really isn't proper English. But you'll note too that her question is of why is that is about why is it that you're not considered a suspect. Now that question does not contain any reference to a murder. The context of this whole conversation is that he ticked a box that said that there was no criminal involvement. Criminal involvement could mean a heck of a lot of things. But he's narrowed in. As soon as she's asked him why is that, he's narrowed in on trying to convince her that he didn't murder the kids. That is very, very telling. That is some serious leakage there. Because he's trying to defend himself, he's trying to lie and come up with this story to prove that he didn't do anything, but he's leaking the information of what actually happened. When that interview came out in December and that RCMP guy referred to a very fundamental wrong with regards to Lily and Jack, I said then that I didn't believe it was an accident. I said that based on what he has said, it sounded like it was not something that we really want to dwell too much on. And now we have Daniel trying to defend himself, going from no criminal involvement to not a suspect, and saying that that means, yeah, so I didn't murder the kids. I mean, criminal involvement or being a suspect could involve so many different things. It could involve covering up an accident. So instead of reporting an accident, covering it up, which was one of the things a lot of us had speculated on. It could involve trafficking, because we've heard of people who sell kids to pay drug debts. We heard Don Wells tried to sell one of his kids at one point to pay off a drug debt. There are so many other scenarios aside from just murder, but that's what he's homed in on. To me, it is just telling. It's disturbing, but it's also so very telling. And then, gotta love this bit of logic, or illogic, at the end. I have nothing to do with the disappearance because they didn't ask me any questions on that. This is not Schrodinger's cat we're talking about here. Just because they didn't ask him a question about something doesn't mean it didn't happen. But of course, here's the thing. And we all know this. You got to have a good memory to be a good liar.
Daniel Martel says during the polygraph test, he was asked several things, including whether or not he was involved in the disappearance of the children.
So it seems that he's forgotten that he told reporters 6 months ago that one of the questions was he involved with the disappearance of the children? Now, a few other things in terms of his body language that I noticed. First of all, when he was making the comment that they concluded that he was truthful, while he's saying that, you notice that he tips his head down, he's got his chin down. That is a protective stance. So he's got his chin down and he's looking up. It's basically protecting the neck. It's a defensive pose. So that is a struggle for him, this making the comment about that he was truthful, which would certainly suggest that at that moment in time he actually wasn't being truthful. And of course you got that pause before truthful as well, which is always a bit of a tell. It's the brain going, hey, don't say that because that's going to be a lie. And at the same time, when he's talking about his answers, saying I was truthful with all my question or all my answers, you can see his eyes darting from side to side, like he's trying to figure out what it is he's trying to say here. And then right on cue, you get the so straight afterwards, another filler, while he's still trying to figure out what he's going to say. And after this bit where he's like, there were no questions on the disappearance or abduction or kidnapping or anything of that nature, you get the lizard lips again straight after that, just before he comes out with, so that leaves me with, I didn't murder the kids. So again, those lizard lips are such a tell for him. You always know that there is a lie attached. And then finally, when he's saying, I have nothing to do with the disappearance because they didn't ask me any questions on that, you see his lip just curl just a little bit on one side. You get that asymmetrical expression, which basically is a sign of contempt. So there's something about that statement, them allegedly not asking him any of those questions relating to the disappearance, which he told a reporter several months earlier that they did. But something about that is causing him to feel contempt there. In a nutshell, this is all just bold-faced lies. That's all it is. He's just lying non-stop here. Now, I don't know how loud that machinery is down the road, but I'm basically pausing nearly every minute because of the sound of trucks going past the house, and they're just way too loud for me to even continue to try and record over them. So I'm not going to continue trying to push on with this, and I think it is a good spot to finish here. It definitely seems like Daniel is starting to unravel a bit here. It's interesting that he was masking again at one point during this interview, but at the same time, we're seeing him going back to some of his original baseline behaviours that he had squashed for a while. Like I said, this guy adapts. He normally listens. Well, we know he listens to people. He listens to YouTubers. He listens to media reports. He listens to other people's interviews. And he takes that on board and he adapts his language or his behaviour accordingly. I mean, after the big helicopter arms interview, the next interview you could see him trying really, really hard not to move his arms. But the helicopter arms interview came about because of comments, and again, it can't have just been me because I doubt that he wastes much time with my channel because he would consider my channel to be small and insignificant. So clearly other people have mentioned before the helicopter arms was going on, there was very little movement from him, which was really off-putting because it didn't seem natural. So he's obviously listened to people saying that, taken it on board, thrown in the helicopter arms, and people have commented on that, and so he's stopped straight away. So we know he adapts, we know he listens. So it is very interesting that those original baseline behaviours are starting to show again. Anyway, thanks to the roadworks, this has been almost a 5-hour job for me. So I'm going to finish here. I'm not going to go into any long outro or anything. So thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button and get this video out there into the algorithm. And of course, please leave a comment below. I enjoy reading your comments, and I think it's important that people do have the opportunity to voice their opinions or ask questions and stuff like that. I know I'm not great at keeping up with responding to all people's comments. I do my best though, but I definitely read them all. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.